But
And
I used to have a job, and you had one of these jobs where it was 8 to 10 hours daily of stress.
right.
You would go in, and it was zoom, 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 pow, 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 zoom, 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 pivot, 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 go back, pivot, 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 go back. Take a deep breath. 7 minutes for lunch at your desk.
And it was exhausting, you know.
It was
It was
exhausting.
That's if you
exhausting.
got lunch.
And well, yes, if you got lunch. Well, I considered the mouthfuls between my turn to talk and the phone lunch. Welcome to another episode of The Little Radio Show. My name is Sandra Fernandez, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Juan Alanis and Angelica Casares, and we're bringing you small talk about big topics. Did you know what the rules were in your place of employment when you did your internship? What could and couldn't get you fired? We're going to talk about a group of interns that learned about a no-no the hard way. Also, what do you do to de-stress? Recent studies show that art activities actually reduce the cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, and provide a physical reaction that's beneficial to everyone. We talk a little bit about this and about some of the things that we do to de-stress. Just a reminder that you can catch us every week on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central Time on hmsnetradio.org. Our show archives and the link to our iTunes and Stitcher channels are available at thelittleradioshow.com. The Little Radio Show is brought to you in partnership with juanofwords.com and HispanicHouston.com. One of the rites of passage that many of us have had to go through is to actually do a summer internship while you're in college. And in fact, many jobs expect you to have graduated doing at least one internship, and some of them expect you to do more than one. I know I've done internships. Juan, you did internships. I think, Angelica, you did an internship.
A few.
Yes. So we have all had the experience with this, and we know how hard it is to find an internship, and then how difficult it is to be in there as someone who, you're transitional, you're on the low of the totem pole, you don't really know what's going on or what you're doing. You're there to learn. I read an article, I want to say on Yahoo News, but I'm not exactly certain, but a group of interns that got a really harsh lesson this summer in office politics. So, per this article, this group of interns had been given a dress code policy of the company. It's a more traditional a traditional workplace. They were given very strict dress codes, what types of shoes they could wear, what types of clothes they could wear. Most of it was more formal business wear. Mm-hmm. One of the interns noticed that what they said was that the senior management in the office didn't really abide by the dress code. And so they got together and they wrote a request to the company to allow them to change specifically the shoes that they wore, thinking that because they're underneath the desk that customers or whatever wouldn't be able to see that they're more casual. And they gave an example of someone who wasn't abiding by the dress code policy. Mm-hmm. Okay. The next day, the group, like these interns who had all signed this request, were brought into a room and let go from their internship, basically citing unprofessional behavior because of the request. And also they were told that the person that they mentioned who didn't abide by the dress code specifically had an injury due to having served in the army, so they couldn't wear like the heels or whatever that they were protesting that they were saying. Now, I didn't read the letter. Okay, I haven't read the letter. I don't know what was involved. I don't know what the policy of the business is, but I'm a little shocked that they were let go for writing an internal letter to their bosses saying, can we please change the dress code? And you know how critical I am on this show, especially of, millennials this and millennials that, and most people have to do. Well, how exactly were they supposed to make the request?
Well, let's take a step back though. What is the purpose of an internship? I mean, I think to me the purpose of an internship is you're there to learn. And you
Correct.
acquire new skills, because there's certain things that you don't learn in the classroom. So you have to go get an internship to be able to get this real world experience. So there's a limited amount of time that you're in there. So maybe it's 20 hours a week that you're supposed to be dedicating to learning these new skills. And for a company, it is a lot of work because they have to train you. They have to kind of babysit you.
Correct.
While
you don't have
you're
the
doing
skills.
this. So, was that really a good use of their time? I mean, and maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but to me, I'm like, was that really an effective use of their time? That all these interns got together and banded and decided that, hey, you know what? We're so concerned about the shoes that we're wearing that we're going to write a letter about it, and we're all going to stand behind this. Like, is that really a good use of your time as an intern who's supposed to be there to learn?
Well, speaking as a person who I always dreaded being assigned the summer intern, dear Lord, because for the most part, it's like they were there for 8 weeks. It took me 6 weeks to get them to understand what was due. So I got maybe 2 weeks of really good work out of whoever the intern was. I agree that maybe it wasn't a good use of their time, but I believe, again, no particulars in this, that it was, wow, talk about a drastic reaction. Letting all of them know. They didn't, it's my understanding that this was an internal thing. They didn't post it until after they were let go. They didn't complain publicly until after they were let go. This isn't like those people that went on, Glassdoor or whatever and said, oh, well, my company sucks. That's not what happened here. They tried to address this internally and they were fired for it.
I can see maybe why, as resourcefulness as the company, why I would do it. Like as Juan mentioned, you're there to learn, and part of the learning process is simple things like how to, depending on the company that you go, if they had a policy, there's a policy for a reason, and some people kind of switch that policy up as our seniors because they've learned the process and they know what to and what not to wear. But I think as interns, if you're there for a week or 2 or 3, you don't know yet. So to try and change that, to try to shift that, you're not exactly learning. You're trying to you think you see a fault in things and you're trying to fix it at this point.
Well, yeah, and as an employee, wouldn't I do that? If I were
but
part
you're not.
of a company,
but they weren't employees, and I can see why they were let go as interns.
To a certain degree, they were. So I mean, I can see where they got together and they said, let's do this. Let's follow the procedure that we think we should follow to make a formal request. I can see that. But I can also see on the other end the supervisor getting that request and being a little bit taken aback. Like, wait a minute, like, how much time did you spend putting this together?
For first, you had to meet together. You had to agree to this. You had a discussion on it, right?
And who knows what the other, who knows? We don't know the case. So who knows what else was happening if this was an isolated incident, if maybe they weren't performing the way they were supposed to, maybe they were, and as people who've dealt with interns, there's it's hard to find an intern that's going to be stellar. Let's be honest. I mean, a lot of times interns, they're there for school credit, or they're there, just because they have to. It's a requirement, and so a lot of times they're not really
figuring
that
it
motivated.
out. They're figuring it out sometimes as interns, and I've seen this before as myself. I interned with other interns. It's that they're just trying to feel to see if they like the industry. They don't really, it's not that they don't care. They do care, but they don't know if they want it. You know what I mean?
Some of them, and I think we've all been that young.
Yes.
And we've all been kind of like, I had internships where I was there and I was like, this wasn't my first choice, but, I'm here because this is what I could get for the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in reference to these interns, maybe I don't know, maybe the approach was because we're just hearing from their side. We're not hearing from the employer side.
Are we being too harsh, Sandra?
No. But I don't know. And I have a knee-jerk reaction that I don't believe that I would have fired them.
Right.
Because letting them go seems to me
a little
extreme. You get interns, and one of the things that's supposed to happen is it's a learning experience for them. And in fact, there's labor laws that decree that you have to show where you're teaching them stuff, or you have to pay them. Those are your options.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay,
there are
so I don't know if these were
in.
paid interns or not.
Right.
But, it just strikes me as a very extreme reaction to fire them for requesting this.
What was the company? I'm curious.
I don't know. I don't know. And quite honestly, even if I did know, I don't think I would call them out on here because I don't have their side. This is not a news report. This is us talking.
Maybe it was something extreme where it was like a law firm or something where they, you know, maybe it was.
And we've talked about dress codes in a previous episode. And the fact is, I worked for oil and gas, where quite literally the color of your socks was in the dress code. Like, you could not wear like brown socks or something like that. And trust me, if someone saw you, they could call you out on that.
It was very militant.
It was very militant. It was very, very like you had to have your badge in a certain place, and you know there's all sorts of other stuff like that, and you know your hair and about covering your tattoos, and it was very. Women had to wear heels.
But I mean,
I guess it was one of those things. It never occurred to me to say, "Oh my goodness, you know, I think that this dress code is completely bogus. Let's stop it." But these kids got together and they made a request and they were let go. And so here's the thing: is like, what have they learned out of this? Is never make a request, or that work is arbitrary? I don't know.
I guess take your chances when you're making a request. I mean, you never know. Like, but the other thing to consider though is that the work environment is completely different than it was 10 years ago.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
It's no longer. I think to be so stringent also, like, you have to wear brown socks and you have to wear this and you have to wear that.
I know.
Is a little bit.
Some traditional items and things have worked for years, and they worked for years for certain reasons, and to quickly vastly change it does become problematic. Do I think they should have been fired because of it? I don't know. I have to hear both sides of the story to make an actual unified decision on my own brain, right? But here's the thing: what did they learn? You have to pick your battles.
Well, they did pick this battle.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You be careful about the battles you pick. Was this really worth it? Was changing a dress code really, as opposed to where you're sitting or the demeanor that you're being your employees, are they treating you a certain way? I mean, was the shoe reference or was the dress code reference really a battle to decipher, this we're coming in and we're here, 4 weeks in, and this is so unfair.
So I think the biggest takeaway for me is like how much you actually should pay attention to the work culture whenever you do find a job. Look at the actual work culture, and does that fit your lifestyle? Is that something that's going to accommodate, where you want to be, how you want to be going into work? And I think that for these interns, they should really consider that as a learning experience. Like, if they're going to another corporate job, is that corporate environment going to be conducive to me being happy? Or do I go to another position, or should I look more carefully at another industry or another company that maybe is a little bit more suitable to my needs personally?
Well, again, as someone who has been working corporate, I don't think if I'd even 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, as an intern, I don't think it would have occurred to me that asking for a modification in the dress code was actually putting my job in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Well, like as the employer suggested that employee actually wore these types of shoes because of an injury due to being in war.
And maybe that has something to do.
If I was an intern and I couldn't wear, 5-inch heels, and I was like, you know what, I can't, I have an injury. I don't have an injury, but there's something wrong with my foot. It actually really hurts, or there's, it can become a medical problem. If I alone would have gone into HR and been like, this is my request, can my shoes be just different, or can my shirt be different because this, this type of material, maybe I'm allergic to it or something, some of that sorts where it's very specific, then I think the company would have been a little bit more lenient to, me or to my, choices if it was really like an actual concern and a real concern.
Yeah.
But that's just my take on it. I just think
as we sit here with the reality, though, that internships are still a requirement in many, many jobs, I'd like to reiterate the takeaway that Juan did earlier: is make sure that wherever you're taking your internship, the company culture is a good fit for you. Because if you're going to be there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and be miserable, the likelihood is the only thing you're going to learn is that that's not the place for you to work.
And the biggest thing about internships, they can be a huge benefit to you later on in your career. So, you want to use them wisely.
Yeah. My first internship in college, I always said that I learned, my first and second, because I did two. I learned more about writing in those 2 internships than I did, I think, the entire length of my college career.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned things in my internships that I never learned in my classrooms. So,
But the first one was the one where I'm like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
I think mine was so when you're in the classroom, you're kind of around the same people around the same age, and so the thought process and the thinking process is all the kind of the same, and so you kind of are just agree to certain things, and then you don't know there's anything outside of that. So you go into an actual you go into a whatever internship that you're doing, and there is a whole other culture besides what you actually did in class. And there is something different.
And the networking is key, because you start building your network and you start getting, having people who can give you good references and saying, hey, you know what, I did work with Sandra and she was really good.
Well, and then on that note, I'm going to actually switch topics. So we talked about a little bit about internships, but I wanted to bring up another article that I saw, and this one is about the benefits of art therapy to stress levels.
Ooh, there's many. Thank you so much for bringing up this article.
So in this case, what they're talking about in art, it's a study, and when they say art therapy, what they literally mean is 45 minutes of you doing some sort of artistic activity. And the important thing to note is that it lowers cortisol levels, the stress hormones, without depending on past art experience. So it doesn't matter if you're a beginner, if you're a real quote unquote artist, if you've been doing it for years, if you just got started, that doing an artistic activity of some sort, coloring, painting, building something, doing, something like that, actually
I was just going to mention that.
De-stress. It's the actual act of it de-stresses, and there's a physical reaction, which is really, really awesome, considering that stress is one of the biggest factors in negatively affecting the health of Americans today.
Correct, because stress manifests in all sorts of ways. I mean, people have all of a sudden allergies they hadn't had before, and stress levels have peaked, and they're allergic to certain things. Stress can definitely not only health, like physical, and then mental health. It affects you in all sorts of ways. But I can see the benefits of it, and I think I knew I've always loved art since I was little. So that is always my go-to thing. Whether sometimes it's not even visual art. I can be like surrounded in some sort of place where I'll sit down and there's rocks, and I'll start forming things, and it's just to bring down, to take, like, everything surrounding me is no longer there. It's just me and what I'm producing, and it's nothing that anybody's ever gonna see or look at. Juan, sometimes he'll see some of my what is it, the notebooks, and I'll have like patterns, and it's just patterns. So it's when I'm having a conversation on the phone or something, I'm creating patterns, I'm creating something, but that creation comes in all sorts of forms. Where music, poetry, literature, anything that doesn't take over your time, or that you feel is a product that other people are gonna see. Usually it's just internal. I'm gonna write a song and nobody's ever gonna hear it.
Well, there's a reason why all of a sudden adult coloring books are everywhere.
I know. Have you seen those huge ones? They're just big ones that look like the size of a table. I'm like, when are you ever gonna finish that?
I haven't seen those. But
you zone out the world, kind of a thing.
Yes, and so adult coloring books are everywhere these days. You can find them everywhere. They're selling them as ebooks. There are apps on your phone that have these like really cool add-ons with different types of things that you can color in. There's all sorts of other stuff. There's places where you can go and do ceramics and wine and all this other stuff. But the reality is that Americans are stressed beyond. I mean, it's an amazing thing how much stress that most people are under. And so identifying that engaging in art activities will actually help you. It's like doing yoga or going and doing meditation or something. It's helpful. Now, the problem is that most people think you have to be creative to do these things. That, I'm really not artistic. You don't have to be artistic. You know what? One of the things, and I found, I realized this a while ago, that when I need a quote-unquote mental break, one of the things that I do is I open up my photographs that are pending to be processed, and I go through and I delete and I crop and I adjust the filter and I save, and then I put those aside to be used later, and that is my mental health break that I do. It's still a little bit of work, but it's, I get to be a little creative and try a black and white filter or go through and make it into a poster and raster it a little or change it into something else, and that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's what they meant by artistic activity, but this is stuff that's like, it's on my pending list, but it's not high priority, and it's not for a client.
I think sometimes artistic is something in the back of the mind that you're imagining already, right? So you're thinking to yourself, and this comes in all forms and fashion. So sometimes it's a tune, sometimes it's a color you see and you're like, I need to remember that color, and you take a picture of it and all you do is just daydream about it. Or it's that pair, a shoe that isn't existing, and you think to yourself, I can create that shoe. I can put it on and I can
Juan,
rock
you're
it.
being very, very quiet.
Well, I was just gonna say, not to be, I'm not as technical as you, but I can just say that doodling is a great and wonderful thing. And
yes.
As somebody who spent a lot of time at the back row of the classroom doodling little circles over and over, I can tell you it was great for zoning out.
But the intent is that it's supposed to. Now, as an introvert, I need my recharge time, or I am just cranky and tired, and I'm going to be no use to you whatsoever. So normally my recharge time is reading, but sometimes there's something very satisfying about actually seeing something that you created.
Yeah. And that can be with words. It can be with just simple, with words. It can be with anything. And as I said, it's the imagination that plays that in the imagination that takes you somewhere, that you come back and you kind of create wherever it is that you're at. And I can identify with sometimes with introverts, being as an anxious person, that I need my recharge. I need to get away. I need to go away. And sometimes, a lot of the times, it's small creations. So I can go and I can have a 5-minute charge, right? So I'll go to the restroom, and I'm going to put myself out there. You don't even know this one. I'll go to the restroom. I'll sit in the stall and I'll grab a few pieces of paper, like the toilet paper. And usually if they're 2-ply, I'll remove them and I'll just start like little patterns, so little squares. And I do this. And I'll tear it apart, right? And I'll just sit there with it in my hand. So a lot of my things, it has to be between my fingers. I have to feel it.
Well, I like to think of it as getting in the right mind space, because like for me, like it can be, maybe it's doodling, maybe it's just writing something random, or sometimes it's just getting, like, it's something as simple as just getting in front of my computer, turning on some music, and just listening to music, while I'm doing something, and that like gets me in the right mind space, because a lot of times you get like in your head and you're like, you have so much to do and you start stressing about it, and then you're like, okay, I just need to like sit down for a minute, give myself a couple minutes, and then I'll be fine.
Well, every once in a while, like yesterday I had a day where I just could not focus on work whatsoever. I mean, I went on and things were taking me 3 times as long because I kept zoning out, until finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to consider today to be a wash and just start anew from tomorrow. And thankfully I didn't have much. And I think that's actually why my brain did the close down, the
it
shutdown.
Procrastinates.
Yes, because I didn't actually have a lot of deadlines yesterday. It's like, guess what? We're taking a break today. Ha ha ha.
But sometimes you have to like say, you know what? Okay, whatever. It's gonna be a day, like you said. That's just gonna be a wash. And
but I used to have a job, and you had one of these jobs where it was 8 to 10 hours daily of stress.
Right.
You would go in, and it was zoom, 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 pow, 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 zoom, 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 pivot, go back, pivot, go back. Take a deep breath. 7 minutes for lunch at your desk.
and it was exhausting.
It was exhausting.
That's if you got lunch.
Yes, if you got lunch. Well, I considered the mouthfuls between my turn to talk and the phone lunch.
But the thing is, like, even in those situations where you weren't taking breaks, by the time you got home, you were zombie. So you kind of were like, all those breaks you didn't take during the day, it was just one long break until you got up the next morning.
Well, the thing is, we wouldn't expect a machine to run at 100% capacity all day for for 5 straight days, for 8 hours a day, for whatever, okay? Because even machines need to be turned off every once in a while. Why do we expect it from ourselves and from our staff?
I've been saying it for years. Why can't we bring the siestas to the United States?
I don't think that I could do a siesta, but I do need a recharge moment.
A merienda. You can do a merienda in between the siesta.
But art therapy is actually, it's an entire profession that they use it especially to reach out to people who have trouble communicating what's wrong with them. They use it a lot with professional therapists use it a lot with children. But just recently it's become mainstream how effective this is for managing stress levels. And a lot of people still, in the United States, in the U.S., we're a country where we're very proud of how much how much we work. Oh, I only need 5 hours of sleep. Oh, I worked X amount of hours last week. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, I know that art therapy is used with kids with autism.
Yes.
We didn't, and the reality is that kids with autism, actually their brain capacity is like that. It's zoom, 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 pack, pack, pack. It's their brain works at that capacity. It's 100% all the time. And so to bring them down from those stress levels that they're actually experiencing, well, not really stress levels, but those levels of high, like go, 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 my brain is working. And so they're constantly like, their brain's always thinking about how something functions, how it's working, how whatever. So they bring them back.
You know what this means? It means that bedazzler is actually a therapy device.
That bedazzler, that pretty thing to the side where we're talking. Me and Sandra do that all.
The bedazzler is actually a therapy device.
I know. Me and you, Sandra.
Is a therapy device.
Me and you, Sandra, have joked about this where we'll be like thinking about something, having something, all of a sudden something catches your eye. You're like, ooh, pretty.
Yes. But that's it's interesting to do. Knitting is probably therapeutic. Crocheting.
It stresses me out because I don't know how to knit. No, knitting is not therapeutic.
Okay, so no knitting for Angelica.
No, definitely not for me.
See, but
does it release like what is it? What do you call it?
Endorphins.
I don't know. You mean like exercise?
Like
I don't know, because exercise releases endorphins, which actually helps alleviate stress. But it has other health benefits as well. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I do know is that it reduces the level of the cortisol levels, which women, we understand cortisol also increases weight gain, stress, lack of sleep. And increase in stress have the additional impact that they both of them increase weight gain or make it difficult for you to lose weight for different reasons. But yeah.
But as somebody that lives with somebody who's a creative, and that you see all of a sudden she's like super stressed out. I'm talking about Angelica, and she's like super stressed out about something, and then all of a sudden I just see her like go into the room and like pull out a bunch of stuff, like crafting things, and she's just sitting on the sofa, and next thing you know, she's like in her zone, and I'm like, for the next 5 hours, I'm like, Angelica, and it's like I'm not talking to anybody. Well, and then when she comes out of it, she's like all happy and chipper, and I'm like, okay, I guess that works for you. I create. So my thing is, I'll go, as Juan mentioned, to my little craft section. I'll grab a couple of boxes and I'll go and I'll sit somewhere, and it could be a floor somewhere, and all of a sudden you'll see just a pile of things, just things that I started that I never finished, that I'm planning to finish, and I'm finishing, and it just piles. And everybody knows when you come into my house, you don't touch whatever it is I'm doing. Everything with this little bitty round ring that I pulled apart with the pliers, and it sits right on my sofa, and it's the smallest little gold speck. Do not move it, because I know it's there, and I will eat you alive if I don't find it as soon as I walk away from it. But it is very therapeutic for me as a person. I've always said this before, and I am a visual artist, and I do go after the things. It's everything between my hands. So it's glue, it's paintbrushes, it's paint, it's the rhinestones, it's all of that I can get between my hands. So wood, anything and everything. But one of my go-to things is tunes.
I like music, especially just loops, loops of music. So I'll turn on something and it's something created, and all of a sudden, and I noticed it's about myself. I turned on the record button and I was recording myself. I was like, you know what? Every time I hit that record button, I stress out and I try to say everything. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. So I just kind of hit the record button. I step back and I let it record myself. And it was very interesting to watch myself. I'm sitting there looking off to the dog and talking to the dog like, oh, doggy, please don't. Oh, dang dog, why are you, barking? Or I'll start, hoo, 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 hoo. And I'm like, what is wrong with me?
That sounds like a conversation for another day. But I really would love to hear from our listeners out there. What is it that you do to de-stress? And yes, you can say wine, and you can say a movie, and you can say reading. But
Keep it clean.
But I'm really interested in knowing if you do any artistic activities or anything where you didn't previously consider yourself to be artistic.
Yes, I would love to hear them because I want to try other stuff. Maybe you guys do too.
And what we'll probably start doing is start posting some photos on our Instagram account of us actually doing our de-stressing activities, and don't be too shocked if mine include food. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Little Radio Show. We invite you to check out our iTunes and our Stitcher channels and leave us a rating or a review. You can find the link to both channels at thelittleradioshow.com.